Hello, lovely family. Welcome back to True Stories That Change Lives. I have a tale to share with you today that is both strong and incredibly loving. As Abigail passed through the glass doors of Hamilton and Associates, which shone in the afternoon sun, her heart pounded with anxious resolve. At 32, she had discovered that bravery was the choice to go in spite of fear rather than the absence of it. She would finally put an end to the most agonizing time in her life today. She would marry Brandon Whitmore today. The reception area smelled of expensive leather and fresh coffee. Abigail checked in with the receptionist, a young woman with perfectly styled hair who barely glanced up from her computer screen. As she waited, Abigail adjusted the flowing emerald coat she wore, carefully arranged to conceal the truth she carried beneath it. 7 months of secret preparation, 7 months of healing, 7 months of growing a miracle that everyone, including her soon-to-be ex-husband, had deemed impossible. The receptionist's phone buzzed. She looked up with a practiced smile and gestured toward the hallway. Conference room 3, second door on your right. Mr. Whitmore has already arrived. Abigail walked down the corridor, each step feeling heavier than the last. The walls were decorated with framed degrees and certificates of achievement, cold reminders of the world Brandon inhabited. A world of deals and acquisitions where people were commodities and emotions were weaknesses to be exploited. She paused outside the conference room door, took a deep breath, and pushed it open. Brandon sat at the far end of the mahogany table, flanked by 2 attorneys in expensive suits. At 38, he remained devastatingly handsome in the way that money could preserve and enhance. His dark hair was swept back perfectly, his jaw sharp, his grey eyes calculating. He wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than most people earned in a month. When he saw Abigail enter, something flickered across his face. Surprise, perhaps? Or was it disappointment that she looked so composed? He had expected her to be broken, diminished by their separation. Instead, Abigail walked in with her chin high, her brown eyes clear and focused. She wore minimal makeup, letting her natural beauty show through. Her chestnut hair fell in soft waves around her shoulders. She looked healthier than she had in the final months of their marriage, when his constant criticism had whittled away at her self-worth. "Abigail," Brandon said, his voice that familiar mixture of authority and charm that had once made her knees weak. "Thank you for coming. Let's make this as painless as possible." She took her seat across from him, her attorney, Patricia Morrison, settling beside her with a reassuring nod. Patricia was a fierce advocate, a woman in her 50s who had built her reputation defending women in difficult divorces. She had seen Abigail at her lowest and had helped her climb back to solid ground. The meeting began with the usual formalities: assets, properties, bank accounts. Brandon had been surprisingly generous in the settlement, perhaps out of guilt, perhaps simply to expedite the process so he could marry Cassandra, the 26-year-old marketing executive who had replaced Abigail in his bed and his life. The discussions droned on, legal jargon filling the air like white noise. Abigail remained quiet, her hands folded on the table. She had reviewed everything with Patricia weeks ago. She wanted nothing beyond what was fair. The penthouse could stay with Brandon. The vacation home in Aspen could be sold. She only needed enough to start fresh, to build a life on her own terms. Brandon sat back in his chair and studied Abigail with a level of intensity that made her skin tingle as Patricia pushed the last paperwork over the table. He abruptly interrupted his lawyer mid-sentence, saying, "You look different. Are you seeing someone?" With so many ramifications, the question lingered in the air. Abigail slowly met his gaze. "That is no longer your concern, Brandon." His jaw clenched, but he remained silent. Patricia moved the documents in closer. "Your autograph is all that's left, Abigail. This will then be completed." Abigail reached for the pen, but as she leaned forward, the emerald coat shifted. The fabric, which had been carefully draped, fell open slightly. For just a moment, the curve of her belly was visible, unmistakable, undeniable. Brandon's eyes went wide. The pen he had been holding clattered to the table. His attorneys exchanged confused glances, unsure what had caused their client's sudden reaction. Patricia, who knew the truth, simply watched with quiet satisfaction. "What?" Brandon whispered, his voice strangled. "What is that?" Abigail straightened in her chair, letting the coat fall away completely. Now there was no point in hiding it any longer. Her hand moved protectively to her abdomen, to the life growing inside her, the life that Brandon had told her she was incapable of creating. "I am pregnant," she said simply, her voice steady. 7 months along. The color drained from Brandon's face. He stood abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "That is impossible. You could not. We tried for years." "The doctor said there was a very small chance," Abigail interrupted. "They never said impossible. You were the one who decided I was broken. You were the one who called me defective." The words hit him like physical blows. Abigail watched as the memories played across his features. The fights, the accusations, the night he had finally said the words that shattered their marriage beyond repair. The flashback came unbidden, vivid, and painful. It had been a cold January evening, snow falling outside their penthouse windows. Brandon had just returned from dinner with investors, his mood already sour from some business deal gone wrong. Abigail had been in the living room researching yet another fertility specialist, desperate to give him what he wanted most. He had walked in, poured himself a drink, and looked at her with such cold contempt that it froze her blood. "I am tired of this, Abigail. Tired of the appointments, the treatments, the disappointment. You are useless to me. What kind of wife cannot give her husband a child?" She had tried to reach for him, to explain that they could keep trying, that there were other options. But he had pulled away, his face twisted with disgust. "I deserve better than this. Better than you. Cassandra would never put me through this hell." That was the night Abigail realized her marriage was over. Not because of the fertility struggles, but because the man she loved had never truly loved her. She had been an accessory, a placeholder, someone to fill a role until someone better came along. Now, sitting in this conference room, Brandon stared at her pregnant form as though seeing a ghost. "Whose is it?" he demanded, his voice rising. "Who is the father?" Abigail felt a surge of anger, hot and righteous. "Yours, Brandon. The child is yours." The room fell silent. Even the attorneys seemed to hold their breath. Brandon's face cycled through emotions: shock, disbelief, hope, despair. He stumbled back to his chair, gripping the edge of the table. "But how? When?" "We were still married when this happened," Abigail said calmly. "Do the math. This child was conceived before you moved out, before you started parading Cassandra around town like your prize." Brandon ran his hands through his hair, destroying its perfect styling. "A child. My child. Abigail, this changes everything. We cannot get divorced now. We have to try again for the baby." Patricia placed a hand on Abigail's arm, but Abigail shook her head. She had known this moment would come. Had prepared for it. "No, Brandon. This does not change anything. You wanted a divorce because I could not give you a child. Well, I am giving you one, but I am not giving you me. Not anymore." "You cannot keep my child from me," Brandon said, his voice taking on that dangerous edge she remembered too well. "I am not keeping anything from you," Abigail replied. "You will have visitation rights, support arrangements, everything legal and proper. But I will not be your wife. You destroyed that possibility the night you called me useless." Brandon looked at his attorneys desperately, as though they could fix this, make Abigail see reason. But they remained silent, understanding that this was beyond their jurisdiction. This was about hearts, not contracts. "Please," Brandon said, and Abigail had never heard him beg before. "I made a mistake. I was cruel. I was wrong. But we can fix this. Think about what is best for the child. A child needs both parents." "This child will have both parents," Abigail said firmly. "But those parents will not be married to each other. I have spent 7 months learning to live without you, Brandon. 7 months discovering who I am when I am not trying to be what you wanted me to be. And I like this version of myself. I am stronger. I am happier. I am free." She picked up the pen and, with a steady hand, signed her name on the divorce papers. The ink seemed to glow in the afternoon light streaming through the windows. Patricia added her signature as witness and pushed the documents to Brandon's side of the table. Your turn, Patricia said coolly. Brandon stared at the papers as though they were a death sentence. What about Cassandra? What am I supposed to tell her? That is your problem, not mine, Abigail said, standing. She gathered her coat around herself, suddenly eager to leave this place, these people, this life behind. You chose Cassandra when you decided I was not enough. Now you get to live with that choice. As she walked toward the door, Brandon called out one last time. Abigail, wait. We can work this out. I will leave Cassandra. We will raise this baby together. I will be different this time. I promise. Abigail paused at the door, her hand on the handle. She looked back at him, this man who had once been her whole world, and felt nothing but pity. You will not leave Cassandra, Brandon. She is everything you wanted in a wife. Beautiful, ambitious, willing to be your trophy. The only problem is she will never give you what I'm giving you now. And that must be killing you. She left before he could respond, walking out of the conference room, out of the building, out of that life. Behind her, she heard raised voices, Brandon arguing with his attorneys, but she did not look back. Her future was ahead of her now, not behind. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Abigail placed both hands on her belly, feeling the gentle movements of her son or daughter. This child, this miracle, had given her something more precious than Brandon's love ever had. It had given her purpose, strength, and the courage to choose herself. As she walked to her car, her phone buzzed. A message from Patricia, he signed. It is done. You are free. Abigail smiled, tears streaming down her face. Free. After so many years of trying to be enough for someone else, she was finally free to just be herself. And that, she realized, was the greatest gift of all. The apartment Abigail rented was a far cry from the penthouse she had shared with Brandon. It sat on the third floor of a modest building in a quiet neighborhood where children played in the courtyard and neighbors actually knew each other's names. The living room was small but filled with afternoon sunlight. She had decorated it simply with soft cream colors and touches of blue and yellow, preparing a nursery corner for the baby who would arrive in just 2 months. Abigail had thought she would feel lonely in this new life. But instead, she felt liberated. Her days fell into a peaceful rhythm, morning walks in the nearby park, prenatal yoga classes, reading books about motherhood. She had started working remotely as a freelance graphic designer, something she had abandoned when Brandon insisted his wife did not need to work. Now, creating again filled her with a sense of purpose she had forgotten existed. It was during one of her routine prenatal checkups that everything shifted again. The clinic she had chosen was small and welcoming, decorated with cheerful murals of animals and rainbows. The receptionist knew her by name now, always asking how she was feeling, if the baby was active. These small kindnesses meant more to Abigail than anyone could know. Mrs. Whitmore, the nurse called, though Abigail had quietly asked them to start calling her Miss Carter, her maiden name. Dr. Torres will see you now. Abigail had been seeing Dr. Torres for the past month. After her previous obstetrician retired, she gathered her bag and followed the nurse down the hallway, past examination rooms filled with the sounds of babies crying and mothers laughing. The door to exam room 4 stood open, and inside, Dr. Michael Torres was reviewing charts on his tablet. He looked up when she entered and his face broke into a warm smile. Good afternoon, Abigail. How are you and baby doing today? Michael Torres was not what Abigail had expected when she first met him. At 35, he had an ease about him that immediately put people at comfort. He was tall with broad shoulders, his black hair slightly curly and often falling across his forehead. His eyes were a deep brown, the kind that seemed to actually see you, not just look at you. He wore his white coat over casual clothes, and there was always a stethoscope hanging around his neck like a familiar friend. We are doing well, Abigail said, settling onto the examination table. The baby has been very active lately. I think he or she is training for the Olympics. Michael laughed, the sound genuine and warm. That is a good sign. Active babies are healthy babies. Let me take a listen and see what this little athlete is up to. As he performed the examination, Michael talked to her about everything and nothing. He asked about her week, if she had been sleeping well, if she needed anything. Unlike Brandon's doctors who treated her like a malfunctioning machine during their fertility struggles, Michael treated her like a whole person. He celebrated every milestone, reassured every worry, and never once made her feel inadequate. "Everything looks perfect," he said after finishing the checkup. "Your blood pressure is good. Baby's heartbeat is strong. You are doing an excellent job taking care of yourself and this little one." Abigail felt tears prick her eyes. She had been so afraid during the early months of pregnancy, terrified that something would go wrong, that she would somehow fail at this too. Michael's constant encouragement had been a lifeline. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything. You have made this whole experience so much less frightening." Michael pulled up a stool and sat down, his expression serious but kind. "Abigail, can I ask you something personal? You do not have to answer if you do not want to." She nodded, curious. "The name on your file says Whitmore, but you asked us to call you Carter. And I have noticed you always come to appointments alone. Is everything okay? Are you safe?" The concern in his voice touched something deep in Abigail's heart. She had not talked to anyone about Brandon, about the divorce, about any of it. But something about Michael made her want to be honest. "I am safe," she assured him. "I just got divorced. The baby's father and I are no longer together. It was not a good situation and I needed to leave. Carter is my maiden name. I am taking it back." Michael nodded slowly, processing this information. "I am sorry you went through that, but I admire your strength. It takes courage to start over, especially when you are about to become a mother." They talked for a few more minutes, and when Abigail left the clinic that day, she felt lighter somehow. That evening, as she prepared dinner in her small kitchen, she found herself thinking about Michael's kind eyes, his gentle voice, the way he had asked if she was safe. It had been so long since anyone had cared about her well-being. The following weeks brought an unexpected complication. Brandon had started calling again, leaving voicemails that swung between apologetic and demanding. He sent flowers to her apartment, expensive arrangements that she immediately gave to her elderly neighbor. He showed up at her building twice, but she refused to let him up, speaking to him only through the buzzer to tell him to communicate through their attorneys. The situation escalated when Cassandra got involved. Abigail was leaving a coffee shop one afternoon when she found herself face to face with Brandon's fiancée. Cassandra was everything the tabloids described: tall, blonde, impeccably dressed in designer clothes that screamed money. Her blue eyes were cold as ice. "So, you are the ex-wife," Cassandra said, her voice dripping with disdain. "The one trying to trap Brandon with a convenient pregnancy." Abigail felt anger rise in her chest, but she kept her voice calm. "I am not trying to trap anyone. Brandon and I are divorced. What he does with his life now is none of my concern." Cassandra stepped closer, invading Abigail's personal space. "You think having his baby makes you special? You think he will come running back to you? Brandon loves me. We are getting married next month and we are going to have the perfect life together. You and your little mistake are not going to ruin that." Abigail could have said many things. She could have mentioned that Cassandra had been Brandon's mistress while he was still married. She could have pointed out that Brandon had told her Cassandra refused to have children. Instead, she simply smiled. "I hope you both are very happy together," she said sincerely. "Now, if you will excuse me, I have a doctor's appointment." She walked away, leaving Cassandra sputtering behind her. The encounter left Abigail shaken. And when she arrived at the clinic for her scheduled checkup, Michael immediately noticed something was wrong. "What happened?" he asked, guiding her to sit down in his office rather than the examination room. Abigail told him everything, about Brandon, about his cruelty during their marriage, about the divorce, about Cassandra's confrontation. The words poured out of her like water from a broken dam. Michael listened to every single one without interruption. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said something that surprised her. "Abigail, I know this is probably inappropriate and you can absolutely say no, but would you like to have dinner with me sometime? Not as your doctor, but as someone who would really like to get to know you better outside of this office." Abigail's heart skipped. She had not thought about dating, had not imagined anyone would want to be with a pregnant, recently divorced woman with so much baggage. But looking at Michael, at the honest hope in his eyes, she found herself saying yes. Their first date was at a small Italian restaurant tucked away on a quiet street. Michael picked her up, opening the car door for her and making sure she was comfortable. Over plates of pasta and glasses of sparkling water, they talked about everything. Michael told her about his work, about why he became a doctor, about losing his mother to cancer when he was in medical school and how it had shaped his approach to medicine. "I realized that healing is not just about treating symptoms," he said, twirling pasta on his fork. "It is about treating the whole person, mind, body, spirit. That is why I love obstetrics. I get to be part of one of the most important moments in people's lives." Abigail told him about her passion for art and design, how she had given it up when Brandon said it was not suitable for a wife of his status. "I used to paint," she admitted. "I have not touched a brush in 5 years." "Why not?" Michael asked simply. "Because Brandon said it was a waste of time. That I should focus on being a proper wife, attending the right events, knowing the right people." Michael reached across the table and took her hand. His touch was warm and gentle. "Abigail, I do not know everything you went through in your marriage, but I know this. You deserve to do the things that make you happy. Paint, create, live the life you want, not the life someone else decided you should have." Tears slipped down Abigail's cheeks. No one had ever said anything like that to her before. Brandon had always made her feel like her dreams were silly, childish, unimportant, but Michael spoke as though her happiness actually mattered. They went on more dates. Michael took her to an art supply store and insisted on buying her a complete set of paints and canvases. They visited the botanical gardens, walking slowly through the greenhouse while Abigail sketched the flowers. They had picnics in the park, Michael always bringing cushions so she could sit comfortably. The romance between them grew in the most natural way. Michael never pushed, never demanded. He let Abigail set the pace, respecting her need to heal from her past before fully opening her heart to the future. But the attraction was undeniable. The way his hand would linger on the small of her back when he helped her out of the car, the way her pulse raced when he smiled at her, the electricity that sparked when their fingers intertwined. One evening, after a sunset walk by the river, Michael drove her home and walked her to her apartment door. The air between them was charged with something more than friendship. Abigail turned to thank him for the lovely evening, but the words died on her lips when she saw the way he was looking at her. "Abigail," he said softly, "may I kiss you?" She nodded, unable to speak. Michael cupped her face gently in his hands and kissed her with a tenderness that made her knees weak. It was nothing like kissing Brandon, which had always felt like a performance. This kiss was real, honest, filled with genuine emotion. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathless. "I have wanted to do that for weeks," Michael admitted, his forehead resting against hers. "So have I," Abigail whispered back. Their relationship deepened after that night. Michael became a constant presence in her life, but never intrusive. He respected her space, her independence, her need to prove to herself that she could do this alone. But he was always there when she needed him, ready with support or comfort or just his quiet presence. He fell in love with her unborn baby, too. He would talk to her belly during their private moments, telling the baby stories, making promises about the adventures they would have together. Watching this strong, successful man be so gentle with her child melted every last defense Abigail had built around her heart. But their happiness was interrupted by Brandon's latest move. 2 weeks before her due date, Abigail received a legal notice. Brandon was filing for joint custody and demanding that the baby carry the Whitmore name. He claimed that Abigail's new relationship proved she was not focused on the baby's well-being and that she was trying to replace him with another man. Abigail was devastated. She had tried so hard to keep things civil, to ensure Brandon could be part of their child's life. But he could not just be a father. He had to control, to dominate, to win. Michael found her crying on her couch, the legal papers scattered around her. He sat beside her, pulling her into his arms. "We will fight this," he said firmly. "You are an amazing mother already. No judge is going to take this baby from you." "But what if they do?" Abigail sobbed. What if Brandon uses his money and influence to take my child? That will not happen, Michael promised. And Abigail, there is something I need to say, something I have been thinking about for a while now. He pulled back slightly so he could look into her eyes. I love you. I love you and I love this baby. I know we have not been together very long, but some things you just know are right. When you are ready, when you feel the same way, I want to build a life with you. I want to be there for every midnight feeding, every first word, every scraped knee. I want to be the father this child deserves and the partner you deserve. Abigail's tears turned from sadness to joy. I love you, too, she whispered. I did not think I could ever love again after Brandon. But you showed me what real love looks like. They held each other as the sun set outside her window, two people who had found each other at exactly the right moment. And in that embrace, Abigail felt something she had not felt in years, hope for the future. 2 weeks later, Abigail went into labor in the middle of a thunderstorm. Michael had been staying with her for the past few days, while sleeping on her couch despite her protests that he had his own home to go to. When her contractions started at 2 o'clock in the morning, he was there instantly, calm and focused, guiding her through breathing exercises while gathering her hospital bag. The drive to the hospital was surreal. Rain hammered against the windshield while lightning split the sky. But inside the car, Michael held her hand and talked her through each contraction, his voice steady and reassuring. You are doing beautifully, he kept saying. Just breathe through it. I am right here with you. The delivery was long and difficult. Abigail labored for 14 hours, exhausted and scared, but Michael never left her side. He wiped her forehead with cool cloths, held her hand through contractions, and whispered encouragement when she felt like giving up. The nurses kept commenting on what a wonderful husband he was, that neither Abigail nor Michael corrected them. Finally, at 4:37 in the afternoon, Oliver James Carter came into the world. He weighed 7 pounds and 3 ounces, had a full head of dark hair, and lungs that announced his arrival to the entire maternity ward. When the nurse placed him on Abigail's chest, she looked down at her son and felt a love so overwhelming it nearly stopped her heart. Hello, Oliver, she whispered, tears streaming down her face. I am your mama. I have been waiting so long to meet you. Michael stood beside the bed, his own eyes wet with tears. He is perfect, Abigail. Absolutely perfect. The next few days were a blur of feeding schedules, diaper changes, and sleepless nights. Michael stayed at the hospital, sleeping in the uncomfortable chair beside her bed, refusing to leave. He learned to change diapers, to swaddle Oliver in the perfect burrito wrap, to recognize the different types of cries. When the nurses taught Abigail how to breastfeed, Michael stepped out to give her privacy, but he was always right outside the door if she needed anything. Brandon showed up on the second day. Abigail was nursing Oliver when the door opened and her ex-husband walked in, carrying an enormous teddy bear and a bouquet of roses. He stopped short when he saw Michael sitting in the chair beside the bed, looking completely at home. What is he doing here? Brandon demanded, his voice sharp. Michael is here because I want him here, Abigail said calmly, adjusting Oliver's blanket. If you would like to meet your son, you are welcome to do so. But you will not come into this room with that attitude. Brandon's jaw tightened, but he set down the bear and flowers. He approached the bed slowly, his eyes fixed on the bundle in Abigail's arms. When he got close enough to see Oliver's face, something cracked in his expression. He looks like you, Brandon said quietly, almost reverently. He has your nose. Would you like to hold him? Abigail offered, surprising herself with the generosity. Despite everything, this was still Oliver's father. Brandon took his son with shaking hands, holding him as though he might break. For several minutes, no one spoke. Brandon stared down at Oliver with an expression Abigail had never seen before, pure, unguarded love. It made her sad for what might have been if he had been capable of showing that love to her. I am sorry, Brandon said suddenly, his voice thick. I am so sorry, Abigail, for everything I said, everything I did. You were right. I was cruel and selfish, and you did not deserve any of it. Abigail nodded, accepting the apology but not absolving him. We cannot change the past, Brandon. But we can do better for Oliver. He deserves to know his father. Are you going to marry him? Brandon asked, glancing at Michael. That is none of your business, Michael interjected politely but firmly. What matters is that Oliver will be raised in a home filled with love and respect. Brandon looked between them and, for the first time, seemed to accept defeat. You are right. He handed Oliver back to Abigail. I will drop the custody suit. We can work out a reasonable visitation schedule. I just want to be part of his life. That is all I ever wanted to, Abigail said after Brandon left. Abigail felt lighter. Michael moved back to the chair and took her hand. You were amazing, he said. The way you handled that, giving him a chance to hold Oliver even after everything, that takes real strength. He is Oliver's father, Abigail said simply. Oliver deserves to have a relationship with him if Brandon can be the father he needs to be. 2 months passed in a beautiful haze. Abigail adjusted to motherhood with all its challenges and rewards. Oliver was a good baby, alert and curious with a smile that could light up a room. Michael was there for everything, the 2 a.m. feedings when Abigail was too exhausted to move, the pediatrician appointments, the first laugh, the first time Oliver grabbed his finger and held on tight. Brandon kept his word about dropping the custody suit, and they established a visitation schedule that worked for everyone. Every other weekend, Brandon would come to Abigail's apartment to spend time with Oliver. He never brought Cassandra, and he never stayed longer than agreed. Slowly, tentatively, they developed a cordial co-parenting relationship. It was during one of these visits that Brandon finally asked the question that had been hanging in the air for months. Are you happy, Abigail? She looked up from where she was preparing Oliver's bottle and smiled. Yes, Brandon, I really am. He nodded, bouncing Oliver gently in his arms. Good. That is good. He paused, then continued. I broke things off with Cassandra. Abigail's eyebrows rose in surprise. When? Last month. She gave me an ultimatum, her or visits with Oliver. She said she did not sign up to play stepmom to someone else's baby. He laughed bitterly. Funny how you find out who people really are when things get difficult. I am sorry, Abigail said, and meant it. Do not be. You tried to tell me what she was really like, but I was too proud to listen. He looked down at Oliver. This little guy taught me what really matters. Not money or status or having the perfect trophy wife. Just love. Simple, uncomplicated love. After Brandon left that day, Michael came over for dinner. He had become a permanent fixture in their lives. And Abigail could not imagine her days without him. While she cooked, he played with Oliver on a blanket on the living room floor, making silly faces that had the baby giggling uncontrollably. Watching them together, Abigail felt her heart swell. This was her family, not the one she had planned for, not the one she had expected, but the one she had been given, and it was perfect. That evening, after Oliver was asleep in his crib, Michael and Abigail sat on the couch together. He had been quiet during dinner, thoughtful in a way that made Abigail curious. I have something for you, he said finally, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. Abigail's breath caught. Michael. He opened the box to reveal a simple but elegant diamond ring. I know we have not been together very long by traditional standards, he said, but I have never been more certain of anything in my life. Abigail, you are the strongest, most incredible woman I have ever met. And Oliver, he is the son of my heart, even if he is not the son of my blood. I want to spend the rest of my life loving both of you, supporting you, being your partner in every way that matters. Will you marry me? Tears streamed down Abigail's face as she nodded. Yes, she whispered. Yes, Michael, I will marry you. He slipped the ring onto her finger and kissed her deeply, pulling her close. When they finally broke apart, both were laughing and crying at the same time. They were married 3 months later in a small ceremony at the Botanical Gardens where they had shared their first kiss as a couple. Abigail wore a simple ivory dress that flowed around her like water. Oliver, now 5 months old, was dressed in a tiny suit and held by Michael's sister during the ceremony. Brandon was not invited, but he sent a generous gift and a card that simply said, "Be happy." The ceremony was attended by close friends and family, but Abigail barely noticed anyone except Michael. As they exchanged vows under an arbor covered in white roses, she thought about how far she had come. A year ago, she had been trapped in a marriage that was slowly killing her spirit. Now she stood beside a man who celebrated her strength, encouraged her dreams, and loved her child as his own. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, Michael kissed her with a passion that made the small crowd cheer. He pulled back just enough to whisper, "I love you, Mrs. Torres." "I love you, too," Abigail whispered back. The reception was held in the garden's event hall, decorated with twinkling lights and flowers in every shade of white and cream. As Abigail and Michael shared their first dance as husband and wife, she caught sight of Oliver in his aunt's arms, watching them with wide, curious eyes. "That is your daddy now," she silently told her son, "not the man who shares your DNA, but the man who chooses you every single day." The months and years that followed were not without challenges. Parenting was exhausting, and blending their lives required patience and compromise. Brandon remained involved in Oliver's life. Those visits became less frequent as he threw himself back into his business empire. He eventually started dating again, this time choosing partners with more substance, though none of them lasted very long. Michael officially adopted Oliver when the little boy was 2 years old. The courthouse ceremony was small and simple, but when the judge declared that Michael Torres was now Oliver's legal father, there was not a dry eye in the room. Brandon had agreed to the adoption, recognizing that Michael was the father Oliver called for in the middle of the night, the one who taught him to ride a bike, the one who would be there for every important moment. 3 years after their wedding, Abigail gave birth to twins, a girl they named Sophie and a boy they named Benjamin. Oliver was thrilled to be a big brother, and the house was filled with the chaos and joy of 3 young children. Michael took to fatherhood like he was born for it, patient and loving even during the most trying moments. One evening, when the twins were 6 months old and finally asleep, Abigail found herself standing in the doorway of Oliver's room. He was 4 years old now, looking so much like Brandon, but with her gentle spirit. Michael came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "What are you thinking about?" he asked softly. "Just how grateful I am," she said, leaning back against him. "For you, for our children, for this life. There was a time when I thought I would never be happy again. And now I cannot imagine being anything but happy." She turned in his arms to face him. "You saved me, Michael." He shook his head, smiling. "No, Abigail. You saved yourself. I just had the privilege of being there to witness it." They stood there in the hallway of their home, surrounded by the evidence of the life they had built together. Pictures on the walls showed birthday parties and family vacations. Toys scattered across the floor spoke of children who were loved and secure. And in each other's arms, they had found the kind of love that endures through every challenge. Abigail thought back to that day in the lawyer's office when she had revealed her pregnancy to Brandon. She remembered the shock on his face, the desperation in his voice when he realized what he had lost. At the time, she had not known how the story would end. She had only known that she needed to choose herself, to choose her child, to choose dignity over comfort. That choice had led her here, to this moment, to this life, and she would not change a single thing. Years later, on Oliver's 10th birthday, Brandon came to the party. He had mellowed with age, his edges softened by time and regret. He watched from the sidelines as Michael helped Oliver blow out the candles on his cake. As the children played together in the backyard, as Abigail moved through her home with the easy grace of someone who was exactly where she belonged, before he left, Brandon pulled Abigail aside. "Thank you," he said simply. "For what?" "For being strong enough to leave me, for giving Oliver the father he deserved, for showing me what real love looks like, even if I was too stupid to appreciate it when I had the chance." Abigail smiled. The old pain finally gone, replaced with peace. "We all get there eventually, Brandon. Some of us just take longer than others." He nodded and left, and Abigail returned to her family. Michael was pushing Sophie on the swing while Benjamin tried to climb the slide backwards. Oliver was showing his friends the new bike he had gotten for his birthday. Her children, her husband, her life. This was her happy ending, not the one she had dreamed of as a young bride walking down the aisle toward Brandon Whitmore. This was better because this ending had been earned through heartbreak and healing, through courage and growth, through learning that sometimes the greatest love stories begin when you finally learn to love yourself. As the sun set over their backyard, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Abigail stood on her porch and smiled. She had arrived at that lawyer's office 7 months pregnant, ready to end one chapter of her life. She had shocked her ex-husband with the truth he had refused to see. And in doing so, she had freed herself to write a new story entirely. A story where she was not a trophy or a disappointment, but a woman who knew her worth. A mother who loved fiercely. A wife who was cherished. A human being who had survived the worst and emerged stronger on the other side. And that, Abigail thought as Michael came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, was the best kind of happy ending there could be. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this story. If you enjoyed this content, don't forget to click like, share this story with your friends and family, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on more meaningful stories.